Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Daily Racing Form YouTube. It's time for a preview of the Saturday race of the day. I'm Gino Buccola alongside David Aragona with producer Lucia helping us out. So we move to Thistledown to take a look at the field for the Ohio Derby. This is the Grade 3 Ohio Derby, traveling a mile and an eighth. It's going to go race number 12 on Saturday at Thistledown. David, think there's a top tier of horses in here who are coming out of some solid races, feel like this is a good spot. Then you have some local horses in here who are taking a swing, at some big money, see if they could get a graded stakes placing. But I felt like Chunk of Gold coming out of the Derby with good form prior to that in Louisiana. McAfee really perked up last time out with the equipment change. And then you have Clever Again, who was the kind of wise guy horse heading into the Preakness, who was only 5-1 there, showed the way before fading. I feel like those three will take the bulk of the action in here.
Yeah, every year it seems like we've got a wide spectrum of quality in the Ohio Derby, but it does feel like we've got some pretty talented horses in here, particularly among those two that are exiting Triple Crown events, Chunk of Gold and Clever Again, obviously both finishing off the board in those races, but probably getting the class relief they need in this lower tier Derby.
Let's take a look at the Timeform US pace projector for the Ohio Derby. They have Clever Again and Plex on the front end. That could be what makes life difficult for Clever Again, in that Plex is pretty quick. Even a horse like Master Controller showed sprint speed last time out, and that resulted in a really nice effort for Master Controller. I don't imagine they want to be too far out of it in here. So just the presence of those two horses alone could be could be a nuisance for Clever Again.
Yeah, Clever Again is a horse that's never shown that he can rate, so they kind of almost have to go forward with him, and we'll see how fast he does go. I imagine there have to be some concerns about him getting the distance based on the way he ran last time, so we'll see if they respond to an early challenge if he gets one and try to rate him a little bit, but kind of feels like he's got to go to the lead.
Let's meet the field here, starting with Brereton's Baytown, who comes into this race off of a ninth place finish against First Level Allowance Company. You see, he was in the Peter Pan, he was in the Arkansas Derby and the Rebel. He just really didn't fire and was beaten double-digit lengths in all of those races, David. You have to go back for his last win to a muddy track at Laurel against $40,000 claimers to get that last victory. So for me, he was just a tough horse to endorse in here.
He's going to be a very big price in this race, though probably not the biggest price of his career because he's gone to post at 117 to 1, 188 to 1
Yeah,
before.
that's true.
So he's no stranger to being a real outsider in races. The connections have picked off some awfully tough spots for him along the way. This feels like it's another one.
Chunk of Gold is multiple graded stakes placed. He was second in the Risen Star, second in the Louisiana Derby. Actually didn't run a bad race in the Kentucky Derby. He finished ninth. You know, when you watch it back, he had a fine start. He was eighth early on. He was about 4 lengths off. He ended up moving up to about fifth in early stretch and then just tired a little bit. He got a pretty good trip, but it wasn't a bad effort from him overall. And this is just a really logical spot. I believe he was entered a couple weeks ago in the Matt Wynn at Churchill, and that race was won by East Avenue. And there were 5 horses coming out of the Kentucky Derby that would have been in there. This is probably a better spot for him, seeing that he's, I think, the 3rd choice on the morning line and feels like a real major player here.
Yeah, anybody who watched our Kentucky Derby coverage on the YouTube channel through the springtime knows that I was a big fan of this horse. He's a real overachiever, and I thought he had a chance in the Kentucky Derby, and I agree, Gino. He didn't run that badly. At the end of the day, he wasn't good enough to compete with horses like Sovereignty and Journalism, who have proven to be some of the better 3-year-olds that have come along in the past decade. But Chunk of Gold, I mean, he was maybe closer to the pace than was really beneficial to him since they were really moving up front in the Derby, but he traveled well past the half-mile pole, was coming around the far turn like he was going with those horses. Then I think he was just exposed a little bit by the distance at the end. He didn't really get the final quarter mile and faded badly in the late stages of the race, but he did some running in the middle stages to suggest that he actually ran his race in that spot, and he had moved forward on dirt in prior races, finishing second in the Risen Star and the Louisiana Derby. I thought not with ideal trips either time due to traffic 3 back and then being too close to a fast pace that came apart 2 back. So I just think he fits really well in a spot like this, Gino. He's getting the class relief that he needs, and I expect him to run well.
Capo Luca is the next one. He will make his first try against Stakes Company in here. Sharp local horse, though. I think of the local horses here, this is one that I would give the best of a chance to compete, to hit the board. Likes Thistledown, has won 3 in a row. But again, David, when you look back at when he was competing with tougher horses at Oaklawn Park earlier in the year, he was really overmatched. So you have to wonder with a horse like this, is it just the class when he comes over to Thistledown and he's facing much, much softer? He still has shown improvement in his last few, and he is heading in the right direction. And the barn has had a fantastic meet. They're hitting it over 40%. So some positives, at least for Capo Luca.
Yeah, when you see those stats for the barn and then you look at the PPs for this horse, it starts to make sense to you because this horse gets significant class relief, as a lot of the horses in the barn do when they come to Thistledown. And even repeating the recent performances don't make him good enough to beat a field like this.
No. But McAfee comes off of a really nice effort. This is the half bro to Torpedo. And I think for one of the first times in his life, he actually comes off of a race where he ran a better buyer speed figure in a better race than his sis, Torpedo Anna. And this was a good effort, David. And what was nice about this was you saw an equipment change, the blinkers went on, and you saw a lot more early speed from this horse. And he had teased ability. He had run in spots, and you knew the connections were always pretty high on him. And he just couldn't quite put away Captain Cook early in this race, and that may have cost him late, as Hill Road is going to run him down on the wire here in the Peter Pan. But that was the type of effort you were looking for from McAfee, who had teased that ability, but had never really put it all together.
Yeah, you're kind of getting at it there, Gino. When I watched that Peter Pan replay, I felt like he was really hanging from like the quarter pole all the way until the point when Hill Road ranges up on his outside and he realizes there's another challenge and starts to run again. Because coming around the far turn, it looked like he had Captain Cook whenever John Velasquez wanted to go. He was traveling so much better than that horse. But once he got set down, it's like he never wanted to pull away from his stablemate until the very end when he got a challenge. So it was a good effort for all the reasons you pointed out: the improved tactical speed, responding well to the blinker change. I mean, showing the ability that you kind of always knew was there. So he's moving in the right direction, heading into another graded stakes attempt like this. It didn't come up as tough a field as it maybe could have, given the horses that we've seen compete in the Ohio Derby in past years. And it just feels like he's a really strong fit in this race.
Completely agree. Good spot for McAfee in here. We move to Extradition. This one is another local horse who has a win at Thistledown, but was defeated by Capo Luca and just has to get a lot faster in here, David.
Yeah, just kind of tough to make a case for these horses that have been coming out of local races at Thistledown. As you said, he wasn't good enough to beat Capo Luca last time, and I'm not a fan of that horse's chances.
Clever again is a stakes winner who was just 5-1 in the Preakness, and he probably had to go a little bit faster than he would have liked, but I think he got the trip that they were hoping for in the Preakness. He was asked for speed, he cleared, he crosses over, and then late in the race, he was sort of in some of that traffic trouble down on the inside when journalism was trying to push through. We're watching his win here, David, in the Hot Springs 2 starts back, where he actually beat Gaming, who was a nice 2-year-old for Bob Baffert. Gaming's been okay at 3, hasn't really like taken the big step forward. So what do you think about Clever again and kind of who he is as a horse right now coming off of that Preakness loss?
I'm a little surprised to see him back in another one of these races going this far, because I would have thought that one of two things would happen after the Preakness flop: that either they would turn him back in distance on the dirt or try the turf, which I think is the way more logical option given his pedigree and the fact that Steve Asmussen was actually trying to get him on the turf during his 2-year-old season before going to the sidelines. And I'm just surprised to see him in a race like this, because it seemed like last time, Gino, as you said, he set a legitimate pace, maybe going a little quicker than they would have liked, but he was completely empty by the time they got to the far
Nothing.
turn and just totally threw in the towel. And he's got that one big victory that we looked at, going the 1 mile distance at Oaklawn. Those are always tough races to make speed figures for. They use a different finish line. I want to see that 101 buyer repeated by him before I'm going to really buy into it. And if he's as short a price as he's listed on the morning line, I think the value lies elsewhere.
Sounds like you and I have very similar feelings on him in this spot. We move to Bohemian Style. This horse was defeated for 12-5 non-winners of 2 in his last 2 races, throwing up 55 and 57 buyer speed figures. Not even quite as good as the horses who were running locally at Thistledown. So he will probably be one of the longer shots in the field.
Yeah, he's stepping way up in class in this race. An ambitious spot to pick first off the claim. Yeah, tough one to build a case for.
We move to Curvino, who is just 1 for 12 overall. And while his form is at least better and more competitive in higher levels than some of the horses we were talking about, the Thistledown horses, he hasn't even cracked the 80 buyer speed figure yet in his 12 starts. And just a lot of races in that similar like mid 70 range where he's kind of late on the scene for maybe a minor award. What do you think about Curvino's chances in here?
Yeah, I mean, he's had a lot of chances at this point and just has never really progressed the way that you'd want to see it for a horse that could be competitive in a spot like this. Watching the last race, yeah, it was a pretty strong allowance field at Churchill Downs, maybe some stakes quality horses in there, but he was sluggish early, got a ground saving trip, had every chance to make a run of the stretch, and just was kind of one pace through the late stages. And that's him. He just kind of lacks a turn of foot, and that's a problem against a field that's of this quality.
What an interesting horse in here, David, was the 9 Master Controller, who has shown speed in all 3 of the dirt races and then really put it all together in the first start as a 3-year-old. Was off from November to May, shows up on May the 24th at Churchill Downs, going 6.5 furlongs in a race that almost felt like it might be like a prep or maybe getting one in off the bench. And this horse went right to the lead, was really impressive, I thought, on the front end, and actually defeated a horse who came back to win a maiden $100,000 claimer next time out with an 83 Beyer speed figure in Sinister Smile. So kind of showed that that race was real, I think. And I feel like Master Controller of the horses that could be a price in here, he's moving in the right direction. He could be forwardly placed. Like I could certainly make a case for including him in some of the exotics.
Yeah, I totally agree. Of those horses that have not yet proven themselves to be stakes quality, he's the one that I could make the case has the upside to maybe bridge the gap and outrun his odds in a race like this. Because even going back to his 2-year-old season, I know it looks like he didn't do any running in those races. He was a gigantic price every time. You go back and watch some of them, they're not as bad as they look. I mean, he
No.
had traffic 3 back at Keeneland. He was actually contesting an honest pace that fell apart when he tried to go the 2 turns at Churchill Downs. That was a pretty strong race for the level, and he battled till mid stretch before just getting tired. And that seems like a legitimate race last time. The 88 Beyer off the layoff, that speed figure checks out when you look up the field and formulator. And when you watch the race, he's a big, tall, long striding horse that looks like he should want to go longer distances. So he's an interesting player in this race. Maybe it's a bit of too much of an ask to actually win with a horse like this, but I'm not going to be surprised when he works his way into the trifecta.
I like something you pointed out there, David, because I do this too. If you're someone who doesn't have a chance to watch a bunch of replays all the time, or maybe you can only kind of pick and choose which ones, if you see a horse like Master Controller and they have that good recent race, if you can go back and just watch 1 or 2 of the races from last year and see, what I like to see is what you said. Those races were a little bit better than they might look on paper and was still showing that early speed in the races going long, which is what's important for him. That's the real weapon that you want to see him using. So always get a little more information if you have the chance to do so. And you can look back at those races last year. They were a little bit better than they might look. We round things out with Plex, David. This one is a grade 3 winner, a multiple stakes winner, and actually a grade 1 placed, a New York bred, but he has beat Open Company. And he feels like a major pace factor in here because his races going 7 furlongs and a mile, he's been right on the lead. He was basically in a 2-horse race last time out in the Bayshore. They sort of locked up early on, him and the runner up here, and they were 1-2 all the way around, and he just was able to gain the advantage and put the horse away late. Right about here, and when we're watching mid-stretch, they're basically on even terms, and he's even a smidge behind at points, but he was able to wear down Faster Gator in there.
Yeah, this is an easy horse to root for, just being a New York bred competing in Open Company, but also the fact that he just runs well every time. He's a hard trier, and it seems like he has been able to negotiate distances that maybe should be outside of his scope so far, trying the mile a couple times. The progeny of complexity seem like they're more sprint types, and when you look at him, he's a small horse, looks nothing like what you'd envision a router to look like. So, I mean, he's already outrun his pedigree and physical a little bit to go the mile, but still stretching out around 2 turns, going a mile and an eighth against graded stakes company. To me, it just looks like it's outside of this horse's wheelhouse. And I know we got the 88 Beyer last time in the Bayshore. The second and third place finishers have come back since then, and they have not run anything close to that figure. So he's a little tough for me to build a case for.
As we round out the field here, we will move to selections for the Grade 3 Ohio Derby. David, I think we had the same kind of ideas in this race, right? Same sort of horses in different order. You're going to go with Chunk of Gold on top. Talk to us about how you stack them.
If I can build any sort of case for Chunk of Gold, I'm putting him on top.
Oh, yeah.
And I just think he's might not be favored in this race, Gino. And he ran well enough through the Derby preps in the spring to suggest that he is of this quality. And I actually thought his Kentucky Derby, in a way, was an encouraging effort based on the race he ran for the first 8.5 or 9 furlongs. So I think he fits really well against this field. And as long as that Derby didn't take too much out of him, which is always a concern for these 3-year-olds, I just think he's landing in a really good spot.
Yeah, I think Chunk of Gold and McAfee are the horses you might be able to bet if one of the two of them floats up a little bit, if money does come through on Clever again. It seems like we're both a little cold on Clever again on the win end, and we both use the 9 Master Controller as sort of that interesting price horse if this one is double-digit odds and maybe a horse that you want to sneak into some of your exotics. So for David, it's Chunk of Gold, 2-4-9-6. For me, it's McAfee, 4-2-6-9. But whoever you play and however you play them, we wish you the best of luck.